The Boy Scouts of America, a private organization that works to develop a more civic-minded future by preparing boys to become men. Their timeless motto, "Be Prepared," has been uttered by millions and millions of Scouts since the organization's inception more than 100 years ago. The Boy Scouts' vision statement echoes this simple directive. This year, the Boy Scouts created a new goal of increasing membership, participation, and retention, as well as securing the volunteers and funding needed to ensure the program's viability for years to come. But there's a hitch.
Should scouting be open to gays?
Yes.
Why so?
Well, because I think that my attitude is that gays and lesbians should have access and opportunity the same way everybody else does.
Recently, the Boy Scouts have come under intense national scrutiny for their current policy to not allow homosexuals as either members or volunteers, forcing the Boy Scouts Executive Council to review their values and policies on membership and volunteers when it comes to sexual orientation. At this time, there are 4 possible options: completely lift the ban, allowing homosexuals as members and volunteers; allow homosexual boys to become members but maintain the ban on homosexual leaders; allow local troops and chartering organizations to make their own decisions regarding membership and volunteers related to homosexuals; or do nothing and maintain the current ban. The Executive Council will make a decision in just a few weeks from now, a decision that will have far-reaching impacts no matter the outcome. In order to effectively communicate the membership policy decisions, as well as maintain engagement with and confidence in the Boy Scouts among alumni Scouts, parents, volunteers, and charter organizations, the following activities will be implemented and measured during the membership policy decision rollout in 2013. These include dedicated communication of membership policy decisions through two-way channels, one-on-one interactions, and factual informational materials; timely, targeted stakeholder outreach to assist volunteers in their own stakeholder outreach efforts; and engaging and consistent face-to-face interaction with leadership. Communication related to these activities must be framed in the light of the current controversy regarding homosexuals. Recently, the Boy Scouts Executive Council developed a strategic roadmap consisting of 7 pillars to guide the organization through 2015. Through these pillars, 3 strategic objectives were established: increase Scouting membership, participation, and retention; secure funding needed to support ongoing and evolving programs for Scouts; and recruit, develop, and retain quality volunteers. However, these objectives must now be viewed through the lens of the current event that dominates stakeholder attention on the organization today: the Values and Membership Review. Therefore, the original communications objectives cannot be successfully implemented without first addressing the membership policy decisions and subsequent stakeholder concerns. With this upcoming policy decision in mind, the following communication objectives will be achieved after the May 2013 decision announcement: establish awareness and foster understanding of membership policy decisions with key stakeholders, volunteers, parents, alumni Scouts, and charter organizations. Increase ownership opportunities for volunteers and charter organizations to proactively communicate actions with parents and alumni by supplying robust and targeted tools. And heighten connectivity between national and local leadership and key stakeholders to instill confidence in the organization's direction. Not surprisingly, there are many stakeholders to consider when dealing with such a large-scale organization. Our stakeholder analysis indicates the majority of these stakeholders are advocates or allies, while there are a few adversaries or antis. However, we have identified 4 key stakeholder segments that will require the most attention in terms of communication: charter organizations, alumni Scouts, parents, and volunteers. Each Boy Scout troop is overseen by a charter organization, such as a church or community group. Faith-based chartered troops make up about 70% of all scouting troops in the nation, with around 1 million members. Many of these religions have held strong positions against homosexuality. Should the Boy Scouts change their position on homosexuals, there could be a significant negative reaction from these and other faith-based churches that sponsor Scouts to the point that these organizations stop sponsoring troops outright. Conversely, civic and educational-based organizations, which sponsor about 30% of all troops, mostly have policies forbidding anti-discrimination. Already, some of these organizations have stopped sponsoring Scout troops over concerns of anti-discrimination litigation. One voice urging the Executive Council to maintain the current policy on homosexuals are some alumni Scouts, who believe homosexuals as members or volunteer leaders puts boys at risk of abuse or undue or even unwanted influences. Yet a recent public opinion poll indicated there's more support among alumni Scouts for abolishing the ban instead of maintaining it. The challenge for the Boy Scouts is to maintain communications so alumni Scouts feel connected to the organization regardless of the final outcome of the Values and Membership Review. By far the largest key stakeholder group, parental opinions vary greatly on the subject of homosexuals in the Boy Scouts, and thus, the outcome of the Values and Membership Review will have the largest effect among parents. Parents are the major gatekeeper in allowing or not allowing their children to be a Boy Scout. Those parents who have strong opinions against homosexuality, often formed due to their religious beliefs, may pull their children out of Scouting or refuse to allow them to become a Scout in the first place. Yet other parents with a much more tolerant or even favorable view of homosexuality will allow their children to remain in Scouting or may even, finally, allow their children to become Scouts. Communication with parents must be two-way and must keep their children's well-being in mind. Volunteers are the lifeblood of the organization, for without volunteers, Scouting would not exist. Nearly all of the more than 1 million Boy Scout volunteers are parents, and so the impacts to the parent stakeholder group discussed earlier will apply to volunteers as well. Volunteers say they're concerned about the overall impact of the final decision on the Values and Membership Review, particularly the impact on local troops should their sponsoring organization decide to no longer remain a sponsor. The 103-year-old Boy Scouts of America currently has more than 114 million members through its 4 programs: Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, Varsity Scouting, and Venturing. The organization is structured on a national to regional to local level basis, with local units having general autonomy over its operations. Members are boys and young men, ranging in age from 7 to 20. The Boy Scouts faces competition from other groups such as 4-H, sporting clubs, religious youth organizations, and other youth groups for potential members. Yet the single focus that has dominated the national spotlight for the Boy Scouts in the past several years has been the issue over admittance of homosexuals. In 2010, the National Executive Council reaffirmed the ban on homosexuals. Yet 3 years later, the Council reopened the discussion following feedback from key stakeholders. In March of this year, the Council widely distributed a questionnaire gathering Scout and parental opinions about the sexual orientation issue to gather further insight in advance of the pending decision on the issue in May. Very recently, the Council proposed a resolution allowing homosexuals to join Scouting as members, but not as leaders. A vote on this resolution will come in May. There are considerable obstacles and barriers to the implementation of a successful communications plan. Current media coverage related to the sexual orientation issue has been decidedly negative, which can, in turn, negatively influence stakeholders' perceptions of the organization. As noted earlier, if parents disapprove of Scouting or disagree with the final outcome of the issue, they may not permit their children to join or continue in Scouting. Similarly, should charter organizations not approve of the final outcome of this issue, some troops could lose their sponsors and would either cease to exist or be forced to find a new sponsor. Gay rights groups and conservative organizations present a challenge and an opportunity depending on the final outcome of this issue. Should the Scouts decide to be more open to homosexuals in some way, gay rights groups may start sponsoring new troops. However, should the Scouts maintain the current ban, gay rights groups are sure to vocally oppose the decision, which will generate more negative news coverage. This same scenario is true, yet in reverse, for conservative organizations that hold opposing viewpoints to those of gay rights organizations. And there are several risks related to each communication objective that must be carefully considered and mitigated. As with all such plans, internal buy-in from organizational leadership is key to effectively implementing and coordinating communications efforts. We've developed a series of aggressive communications options to achieve our stated communications objectives. We'll start by sending a survey to all key stakeholders to determine which communication channels are most trusted and frequently used. Next, we'll craft a white paper explaining the membership policy and the rationale behind the decision. This paper will be written in English and Spanish and will be distributed online via Scouting websites and blogs, as well as in Scouting magazine. We'll hold webinars and local meetings to explain the membership policy to volunteers and to prepare them to communicate with parents when asked about the membership policy. We'll create a membership policy hub on internal and external websites to house all information related to the membership policy, as well as forums to promote internal and external discussion. Finally, we'll create a positioning statement on the membership policy for quick and simple communications of the decision online and via social media. Now, we've created several membership targets for this objective, including 40% of all volunteers will attend webinars and 90% will host local meetings with parents and members. At least 10% of the parents and volunteers will feel the Boy Scouts adequately educated them about the membership policy decision that was made. And volunteer participation will remain steady. For this objective, we'll supply volunteer leaders with the tools they need to proactively communicate with parents and alumni scouts, including prepared materials such as news releases, PowerPoint presentations, and fact sheets that volunteers can directly disseminate to parents, as well as templated materials such as a localized news release and newsletter content that volunteers can customize with local unit information before dissemination. We also recommend establishing an online forum on the My Scouting intranet to allow volunteers to share experiences, advice, and best practices. The measurement targets associated with this objective include more than 100,000 downloads of prepared and templated materials by the end of the year. At least 10% of volunteers will feel that the Boy Scouts provided the tools that they needed to communicate with their stakeholders. And at least 50% of issues presented in the online forum were resolved, as determined by content analysis. For our final objective, we recommend leveraging the various communication channels to share content from senior leadership to communicate the membership policy decision with compassion and assertiveness. Content should be posted and published as soon as possible following the May decision. We recommend creating a senior leadership regional roundtable so leaders can meet and discuss the decision and its implication among all stakeholders. Meetings should be quarterly. We'll reach out to the leaders of primary chartering organizations, such as the faith-based organizations mentioned earlier, to discuss the changes and implications for their sponsored troops. Finally, we recommend leadership respond bi-weekly to questions and concerns posted via the Membership Policy Hub. Questions and responses that generate positive engagement will be used as content for social media posts and blog sites. The measurements for this objective include at least 1% of volunteers will feel that the Boy Scouts understand their feelings about the membership policy decision. At least 0.5% of parents and alumni scouts will feel the same. 100% of major charter organizations will participate in calls and will feel their concerns have been heard, while at least 50% of those organizations will maintain a troop. And 100% of regional councils will hold at least one roundtable meeting. The messages associated with these objectives will be tailored to align with the results of the Vision and Membership Review. Should the Scouts make a change to the membership policy, messaging to stakeholders will emphasize this change will support the group's overall mission to grow leadership in America. However, should there be no change, messages will note that the Scouts do not want to infringe on parents' rights to discuss issues of sexual orientation with their children. As you can see from this timeline, with the membership policy decision coming in just a few weeks, we've already begun the preparation work for many of the tactics mentioned. Once the May 22nd decision is made, we'll quickly implement those tactics needed to communicate the decision with the vast majority of tactics implemented by June. By the end of September, we anticipate the Boy Scouts to be in a reactive and maintenance and evaluation phase, conducting follow-up surveys with key stakeholders. Through open, honest communication, the Boy Scouts will successfully communicate the new membership policy and will be able to do so in a way that will mitigate the negative impacts for the organization so they can grow in time and become a new Boy Scouts for the 21st century.